You're listening to the Life Zone here on Zone Radio, broadcasting live from the Red Shed in the V&A waterfront to the world. I'm Elaine Housen. In the studio with me this evening, I have Craig Kukumur, who's going to be talking about theta healing. Craig is a life coach, conflict management trainer, and theta healing instructor. Craig, welcome to the show.
Elaine, good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Excellent. Just to remind our listeners, if you'd like to ask Craig a question, you can go to our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Zone Radio. You can put your question there and I'll ask it to Craig on air. So then, Craig, how did you actually become involved in this kind of work?
Elaine, it was actually quite an interesting story. I met a lovely lady by the name of Natasha last year, who happens to be the Russian representative for theta healing. And at the time, there was a bit of a crisis in the family, and something happened with my mom. And I was looking at alternative ways of trying to sort things out and trying to improve my mom's health. And Natasha said to me, she said, "Listen, why don't you try theta healing?" And I was like, well, what exactly is it? And in the broken English conversation, because she's not native English speaking, she basically explained the things to me, and a couple of months later, things started to change for me. She did a couple of theta healing sessions with me, and the next thing you know, I got myself stuck into theta healing into a full-time capacity, where I'm now a trainer or an instructor, and I'm going to study further in the States in the summertime.
Okay, just if I might ask, how long have you been involved in this?
My first theta healing session with my girlfriend was last year in the summer in the UK. I was based in the UK for a long time, so I've only been relatively short period of time, probably about 9 or 10 months. But I'm pretty much on like a fast track program, if you want to put it that way.
Okay. So then, what is theta healing?
Elaine, theta healing is an energy healing modality. It is the ability for us to try and heal ourselves. Now, if you have a look at the definition of healing, healing is the ability to make something whole. So something that's dysfunctional, something that has got a problem with it, that's to make something whole. But a lot of people refer to healing as only a physical side. But there's more to it. There's actually an emotional and a mental side as well. And theta healing is based around the use of being able to tap into the theta brainwaves and then effect an instantaneous or a progressive healing of a person's emotions, their mind, and also their body.
Okay. So, and how did this whole concept of theta healing come about?
Well, theta healing was developed in the United States. It came about by a lady by the name of Vianna Stibel, and she's a really fantastic lady. I've met her down in India. What had happened at the time was that she developed cancer in her leg, and she looked to a range of alternative medicines and therapies. She trained as a naturopath, and through a lot of stuff that she did, she eventually realized that she tapped into this beautiful source of being able to heal somebody. And obviously people got to hear about her healing, and they kind of like went, well, hang on a second. If you can do it for yourself, then I'm sure you can do it for me. And pretty soon, because she had also done quite a bit of psychic stuff, they started coming to her and saying to her, well, listen, please, can you heal me? She started getting really good results. And within quite a few months, they started to say, well, listen, please, can you show us how to do this with ourselves and how to do it with others? Now, theta healing gives you the ability to work on yourself, and it also gives you the ability to work with other people. And in 1995, 96, around about that time frame, Vianna started documenting these things, putting it down into manuals and books and DVDs and stuff like that. And that is how theta healing came into existence. It's not something new. It's a collection of techniques and abilities that we've had for ages and ages and ages. But theta healing as a energy healing modality was only established in 95.
Okay, so it's roughly about 20 years or so that's been around for.
Yeah, pretty much something like that.
Quite a long time in itself.
It is.
Okay. And you said based on other sort of knowledge that's already been out there, and she's just documented it and put her own sort of thing to it, her own touch, or?
Yes and no. I'd say she's gone ahead and she's had a look at the way that she's actually progressed through a meditation state to enter into what we call the theta state. Now, the theta state allows you to connect to the theta brainwave. And it's from that perspective where we believe that we can actually witness the changes in a person's body. A lot of the stuff that she does are very much linked to other things, like there will be correlations with NLP and there will be correlations with other healing modalities and stuff like that. But what she's done, and because she was originally brought up in the Christian church, She's put everything together in a non-religious kind of way. It's a spiritual thing. It's not based on any type of religion. And she's allowed people who are Muslim or Buddhist or Christian or from any faith or denomination to actually come in and take part and become theta healers. Because it's not us that are doing the healing. We facilitate the person to do the healing to themselves. So that's where the whole thing revolves around.
Okay. And I think you've sort of answered the question I wanted to ask now, is why is it called theta healing? Obviously it involves theta waves.
It does involve theta waves. It's a healing process. I was privileged to go out to India recently to go and do an Ayurvedic treatment program. And I'm a curious person by nature. So when my girlfriend said, listen, let's go and do this thing, I was a bit, yeah, okay, there's, it's going to be vegetarian foodstuffs and stuff like that. I'm a big time meat eater. So I went out there, and what was really interesting for me was that one of the doctors gave a talk the one evening, and he talked about toxins. And he talked about the way that the body reacts to toxins. And so much of this stuff reflects not on the physical side to a person's body, but on the emotional and the mental side to a person's body with regards to theta healing. That it was phenomenal that she decided to brand it as such as theta healing. She needed a name to actually put it into. And because we go into the theta state, and because it is the actual healing of a person's body, that's why it's been called theta healing.
Okay. So, and then what are the benefits of theta healing for a person?
I would have to start on the left-hand side of the table and finish about 3 miles away, because there are numerous benefits. If you have a look at yourself as a person, you have a physical and emotional, a mental and a spiritual side to yourself. Theta healing has an impact on all 4 of those areas. It gives you the ability to tap into underlying negative or limiting subconscious beliefs, and it gives you the ability to change these. The benefits are profound. It can have an impact on your health. It can have an impact on your daily life, your relationships with others. It can help you improve in success. It can remove fears. It can help you in business. It can help you with money. The list is absolutely astounding.
Okay. So then why would someone come for a healing session?
Pretty much a lot of people would turn around and they would look for an alternative way of healing, because they might be disillusioned with either traditional medicines, or they might be thinking, well, hang on a second, there is something wrong in terms of my mindset. A lot of the people that I've encountered have had a look at things from a traditional perspective, and they're gone, okay, fine, I'm going to have some Western medicine, I'm going to get the doctor to prescribe me some pills, but my emotional state or my mental state is very negative at the moment. I need to change it. And theta healers will come to us because they've heard of other people being cured of various bits and pieces of things. Some have, with assistance of medical drugs, been cured from cancer. Others have been cured from cancer through a process of using theta healing to change the mindset. And the mind is a really powerful tool. And what then happens is, because the person changes their mindset, they can fight these crippling, these debilitating diseases, and they can really recover themselves to the state where everything is gone. But it's not like a magic pill or something like that. We are not classified, or we're not trained as doctors. So one of the most important things that I have to say to people is that a theta healer will not tell you to go off your medicine. They're not qualified doctors. We can't tell you to go off your medicine. But what we do believe is that we will work in conjunction with the doctor. So if somebody comes to me and they say that they've got cancer, and they say to me that they've decided to go off the actual medication, I turn around to them and I'd say, hang on a second, you need to still carry on seeing your doctor, because theta healing is going to be a supplementary thing which will have a profound impact on you, but you still need to take the advice of your doctor, because I'm not a doctor.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier on about it works on different levels, spiritual, physical.
Yes.
So how does theta healing have the ability to work on those various levels?
Okay. Let me give you an example. You have a look now. I've spent a lot of time in the UK, and obesity is a very, very big problem in the UK. And one of the examples that we sometimes refer to is a lady comes through to a theta healer and she sits down and she's overweight. And she has this huge problem with being overweight. And the theta healer works with her and says to her, well, okay, let's do the process. And through the process, there's various techniques that we use. And one of the techniques is called digging. Through the digging process, the theta healer gets through down to the bottom underlying problem. And what it is that this lady, as a young kid, was molested by somebody, physically assaulted. And during the actual assault, the person has turned around to her and said, "Oh, you are such a sexy girl." So a belief has formed within this person, this lady, as a young kid, that associates sexy with being unsafe. So the only way that the mind can therefore try and compensate for this is say, well, hang on a second, if sexy and if sexy is unsafe, then my weight, because I'm very slim, maybe if I become fat, then I will be safe. And so what happened through this process that they did, the lady was then, it's like a self-discovery kind of thing where she realized that her body, subconsciously, the belief systems that she had affected since a child, every time she'd lose weight, she'd put it back on again. And every time she'd go on another diet, she'd put it back on again. And she couldn't understand why. But through the theta healing process, we have the ability to go in and find out what these underlying limiting beliefs are. And then we give the person the ability to change. We say to them, do you want to change this? And then we go through what we call belief replacement programs. So we will say, we'll go into the meditation state. We will say, this particular program needs to be replaced. We will then do a meditative prayer. And with the person sitting in front of us, the belief will be changed and a positive belief will be brought in. And then you see that becomes an instantaneous change, and the lady's subconscious underlying belief of associating sexy with being unsafe can now be changed so that she can be sexy and safe at the same time.
You're all listening to the Life Zone here on Zone Radio, where you say it and we play it. I'm Elaine Howes, and my studio guest is Craig Kokomoor, and we're speaking about theta healing. Craig, so how does theta healing work?
Theta healing requires a person to have a belief in a higher power. So you would need to believe either in something like God or in Muhammad or something of that nature, but it requires it to be the creator. And what theta healing then does is it gives a person who's trained up as a theta healer the ability to go in and find out where these underlying issues are, find out where the problems are. There's quite a bit of intuitive work that also happens with theta healing. And a theta healer would sit down with a client, and through various questions and through a bit of meditation and through some intuition, they would pick up on where some of the underlying issues are. And then they would delve into it, and then they'd say, yes, okay, now we need to actually work with something like this. It also relies on quite a bit of training to become intuitive. Some people have natural intuitive abilities, others don't. And it's not that a person won't be able to develop those intuitive abilities, it's just that it's lying there dormant, and the person hasn't practiced. They haven't practiced what we call the scanning technique, so they wouldn't be able to pick up a spot in the body which resonates some color wave, or when you talk about auric fields, it would be able to identify a particular spot in the body because your intuition says to you that there's a problem over there. And that might be linked either to a physical problem, or it might be linked to a mental or a traumatic event that person has experienced. And that's the basis of theta healing. You use certain techniques, you find out where the issues are. You then give the person, it's got to be about free agency. You give the person the ability to say, yes, I want to change something. No, I don't want to change something. And then you go through a meditative state and you effect that change. And it's very important to understand that theta healers don't produce a magic wand and go, hey, presto, your sickness is gone. It is a process whereby the theta healer is a facilitator for that person through what they believe in their creator to effect the energy healing itself.
So basically, what is the process? And if you take us through someone coming to you, what is the process using theta healing? Okay,
typically there's two things that we get involved in. The one is a consultation, and the other one is training. Now, what I'll talk about is the actual consultation itself. A person will come to me and they'll say to me, Craig, I have an issue that I need to resolve. And I'll say, okay, what is the issue? And it might be a traumatic event that happened in the past, or it might be a physical illness. And sometimes a physical illness can be manifested. So I'd sit down with the client in a nice quiet place, get them into a comfortable position, and then through a bit of discussion and stuff like that, we'll pick out, okay, this is the kind of direction that the client wants to go in. I will then make sure that the client has had enough water, because it also relies on the client being hydrated. What will then happen is I'll start off the session and we'll go into a meditation or a prayer state. Now, it's during this state that I, as a theta healer, will actually enter into the theta state where I connect onto the theta brainwave frequency. And I will then go into the meditation, and I will then initiate what we call an unconditional love blessing on the person. So I will ask for unconditional love to be bestowed on that person on all the levels, and I'll speak about the levels in a later stage. But it then moves on from there, where when I come out of the meditation, I will then say to the client, right, I need to ask your permission to do this. And then we'll start with the intuition, and we'll start a digging session. Now, the digging session is very much a question and answer session. I have specific questions that I ask. I don't lead the client into any kind of route. I don't say, well, okay, we need to go down this route or that route. For example, I would say to somebody, okay, fine, you felt an anxiety for the last 6 months and it's really starting to worry you. And I'd say, when was the first time that you felt that anxiety? And the client would say, well, it was about 6 months ago. And then I'd say, how did that make you feel? And then they would say, well, anxious. And then I'd go through a various range of other questions. And I would say, when was the first time that you felt? And if they say, well, 6 months ago, I say, well, hang on, was that the first time, or did you feel it before then? And then you start tapping into the memory banks, and you start hitting the buttons, you start pushing the buttons, and the person will, yeah, actually, hang on a second, I started feeling anxiety about 6 years ago. Then I'd say something typically like, what was happening in your life at that stage? And they say, well, I was actually sitting in a situation where I could have lost my job. So the digging session, where we're sitting there with the client, then starts to uncover and starts to dig into what these underlying issues are. And eventually what will happen is the underlying issue will affect, and it'll hit something like an emotion, or it will trigger off something. And the client will then feel a really big emotion related to something. It could be anger, it could be fear, it could be sadness, or whatever. And we'd sit as a theta healer, and we'd say to them, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate it. And then they'd say 3. Then as a theta healer, I know that person has not really hit the underlying issue. Now, there are some times where something like a fear of drowning is not actually the fear of drowning. It's actually the fear that this person is a mother, and as a mother, she doesn't want her children to be without a mother because she wants her children to succeed. And she has a fear that her children will not succeed without her help. So you go in and you hit these underlying issues, and eventually when you get to something that repeats itself, an emotion that comes out, sometimes the emotions are pretty heavy and a person starts crying in front of you, or they start really, you can see the emotions start building up. And when you say to them, right, what scale have you hit there, 1 to 10? And they say, well, I've hit a 9. Then you know that's the actual issue that you need to start working on. So when you start working on that issue, the next thing that you need to do is you need to decide on what action you're going to be taking. It could be a belief system that needs to be changed and replaced with a positive belief, a limiting belief kicked out and a positive belief brought in. Or it could be something else, like a feeling that that person doesn't have. And through a connection with the theta state and through a connection with the creator, you then help that person with what we call a download, or teaching that person what it feels like to be loved, or what it feels like to live without fear. The options are discussed with the client, and you say to them, look, okay, I think where we've reached to now is pretty clear to you because the emotions have come out. And if they have a fear that their children won't be able to do something without them, you can then say to them, would you like to learn how you can live without that fear? And if the client then gives you permission, because this all relies on free agency, you then sit down, and in the meditative state where you go into the theta brainwave, the theta brainwave will then start to affect this energy release within the client. The client will also pick up on the theta brainwave because they'll be in meditation. And the client's, the facilitation process then actually initiates this healing within the client. And the client then changes that belief. And what we have is we have a muscle test, which is very similar to kinesiology. And the muscle test is a simple yes or no test. And what we do is, when we've found an underlying issue, we will, when we ask them for permission to change it, we'll say to them, okay, let's quickly test it. We'll do the muscle test, and we'll find out whether they subconsciously believe that belief to be true or false. We'll then go through the meditation, we'll change the belief, or we'll impart the feeling, or we'll teach them how to live without fear, or whatever it is. And then after that, we'll redo the muscle test to see how it's changed or not. If it hasn't changed, there could be several reasons. One of the simplest reasons is that the person is not hydrated, or it could be that that person's the language that was used was not the basic language that the person uses. If a person is English and you're doing it in Afrikaans, then obviously the subconscious mind is not going to react to an Afrikaans statement. You need to actually say it in the mother tongue of that person. There's various other things that could also be associated with it. You might have a particular belief which is also underpinned by a various range of other beliefs. It could be a pyramid scale, or it could be interconnected. So sometimes you can trigger something, you can find out what the belief is, and you can change it straight away. Other times you need to work on a series of beliefs which all have an impact on each other. Once you've initiated the meditation and you've facilitated the healing by the Creator, what then happens is that as a theta healer, you have to witness this change occurring. And when you witness the change occurring, it's not like I sit there with my open eyes and I see this beautiful picture coming in front of me and something runs away. But it's more in the meditative state where you're using your intuition and you're using your natural abilities. You watch the actual healing take place in this person. Once the healing has taken place, normally it lasts for about 30 minutes to about 45 minutes, sometimes about an hour. Once the healing has taken place, you then draw the session to a close, and you then start saying to the person, okay, fine, how do you feel? And I tell you what, the amount of change that I have seen in people who've undergone a digging session and a healing session like this is phenomenal. The emotional change in that person, from coming in there with a look of worry on their face, or fear or sadness or something like that, to absolute bliss, euphoria, happiness. It is so beautiful. I just can't describe it to you on the radio, but it's just so magnificent.
So you mentioned you actually witness the change. Now, how does that come in? You mentioned a picture, but does it come in the form of a picture, or does you watch the person's actual physical something happening physically, or is it emotional? How do you witness this process?
Now, the witness process is where we say we've gone into the theta state, we're in a meditative state, we've got our eyes closed, and we're visualizing the person, and it's got to do with developing our psychic abilities and our intuitive abilities at the same time. And we will then visualize the person's body in front of us, and we develop the ability as a theta healer, we develop the ability to have a look in our mind's eye, in the actual visualization, the psychic ability and the intuitive ability to see this actual change happening. So for instance, if you have got something which is an emotion which is related to the heart, we will then visualize and see the emotion or the fear or whatever the problem is related to the heart being taken out of the heart and being sent up to the Creator's light. And then that thing has been dealt with. That's the part of the witnessing process.
Okay. There was a question I actually wanted to ask you when you were talking about that. Just before I get to that question, you mentioned hydration. What is the importance of being hydrated?
Okay, it's quite important that the body is hydrated. Sometimes what will happen is if your body is not hydrated, then the kinesiology test, the muscle test that we have, doesn't work. Now, normally what we would do is we'd put the person into a position facing north. And because we believe in a morphogenic field that surrounds the person, this field has to be intact. So if the person's legs are crossed, if the person's arms are crossed, then there's a break in this field. So what we then say to the person, okay, fine, you need to hydrate, have a glass of water. There's 2 pressure points on the back of your kidneys, push the pressure points, give it 2 or 3 minutes. The kidneys then release a bit of water into the system. You then put the person into the right position facing north, and you then there's a technique which we call the zip up technique, which we then basically zip up this morphogenic field and we make it whole. And that's the whole idea of the hydration, is to make sure that this person can actually correctly test during the muscle test. Because if a person's dehydrated, the kinesiology between all the neurons and everything doesn't work 100%. The subconscious doesn't allow you to actually test properly if the person's not hydrated.
Okay. The question I actually wanted to ask was around the beliefs. You said, you want to change negative beliefs to positive beliefs. Mm-hmm. Now, is that something that you suggest to the client, or does the client say, well, I don't like swimming because I'm afraid of drowning, and you change it to a positive statement? Does the client actually do that, or do you actually sort of download it to them, or give them a sort of a direction how to change it?
Alan, probably 95% or even more of the time, the clients don't really know what they want.
Okay.
They know they've got a problem. They know they've got an issue that they need to deal with. We rely on intuition. Now, if you're a spiritual person, you would rely on your intuition and your spirituality and your connection with Creator to actually guide you in the right direction. It's like if you were very much part of the Christian faith, you would rely on God and Jesus to give you guidance and words like that. Now, we believe that as theta healers, we have this connection in the theta state where we get the intuition from the Creator. And the Creator is the guy who's created the whole universe. He might not be a guy, he might also be a girl, but he guides you. And it's this guidance that says, well, if this person has a fear of this, ask them that question. If the person has a fear of that, ask them that question. And through that digging session, you then get down to something which, yes, okay, this is an issue. So you then test it, and the person, let's say for example, there is a limiting belief that money is evil. So you would then say to the person, let's do the test. You do the test, the person tests positive to say yes, subconsciously he believes that money is evil. And then you say to the person, well, okay, would you like to learn, or would you like to know how to live with money? Would you like to learn that money is safe? And it's very important. You have to know that the subconscious doesn't understand the word not, doesn't understand negativity. It's got to be very simple questions or very simple statements that you do. And we have, I've got the books in front of me, but we have so many beliefs and so many positive things that we know are the positive side of things to something that happens when it's negative, that we can offer to the client and say, well, would you like to know that money is safe? Would you like to know that you can be safe with money? Would you like to know that you can live your life with money? And it's to know how to understand and to feel safe with it and feel comfortable with it. So we have the training, and we have the intuition and the guidance from the Creator and all the resources, so that we actually guide the person and say, okay, well, if that's the problem, this is what we need to look at changing or releasing. There's oaths and vows and a whole range of other things as well. But we then have the ability to say, okay, would you like to learn this? Would you like me to download this feeling for you? And that's pretty much how the thing works. And it's fantastic. It's each theta healer, it's theta healing is very structured in the sense that we know what the things are that we should be working on. We have training in terms of how we should be running the digging sessions. We've got a code of conduct in terms of how we do things. And it's fantastic. The client comes in and we sit down, we go through the stuff, and you start the session and you might be subconsciously thinking yourself as a theta healer, okay, it's going to go this direction, but guidance from the Creator takes you in a totally way out direction, and the next thing you know, you're working on something that you never thought was possible.
This is the Life Zone on Zone Radio, playing the music that you want to hear. Craig, getting back to our discussion on theta healing, so now why does it work? What do the scientists have to say about it?
Okay, there's quite a bit of a debate about theta healing and how it works and what doesn't work. When Vianna healed herself from cancer, after a while she actually went to a group of rocket scientists in the States, and she went, hang on a second, guys, how does this stuff actually work? What's actually happening? I can't understand this. Pretty much, well, that's probably not what she said, but something along those lines. And they connected and they did a bit of a study with what they call, now I've got to get the pronunciation right, an electroencephalograph. And this is a thing which measures your brain waves. And they got some theta healers in to work with some clients, and they put these wires and stuff on the people's brains, and they tested them. And it was measured and it was recorded that these theta healers actually went into the theta wave, the brainwave state. Now, the theta brainwave is associated with deep sleep. And as a normal person, it's not really that easy to just go into the theta state. But the theta healers were measured with this electroencephalograph, and they went into the meditative state. Now, when you have a look at some of the other things, there is a very strong school of thought that the theta brainwave actually has a very therapeutic and a healing manner to it. So whilst you're in a deep sleep, it actually starts with the healing process on the body. And there's a lot of discussion and a lot of talk about what actually works and what doesn't work. There's good publicity and bad publicity, as it is with everything. And the science behind it is pretty much, it revolves around being able to connect into the theta state and then to affect the energy healing. We still are trying to understand how energy healing works, and we don't really have a lot of scientific background, but the things work. There's certain things that happen where energy starts flowing from one section of the body to the other section of the body, and the scientists can't prove what's actually happening, but the stuff works. Now, to give you an example, especially when it comes to disease, one of the case studies that we refer to is a woman who developed cancer. She actually manifested cancer in her body, and the theta healer did the digging session with her, the consultation. And when they got down to it, it was that the woman had this fear that her husband was going to leave her. Now, the husband had initiated divorce proceedings. And the woman went, well, hang on a second, I'm going to manifest cancer. Not consciously, but subconsciously, the woman manifested cancer in the body. And this is where it ties into the belief systems, it ties into the emotions, it ties into what's happening in a person's life at that point, and how these things link into the physical side of things. There's still ongoing studies and scientific research being done, and there's also other things that are being done by people who are using theta healing, for example, in the business life. There's a guy by the name of Hiro who has in Japan applied theta healing to business, and being an investment kind of person, he's actually succeeded in taking his company and making it incredibly profitable by changing these limiting and these negative beliefs within his workforce, by giving them theta healing sessions, by training them in theta healing. His company has really started to shine in a very difficult economic period. So there's different applications that are taking place, and there's still people doing research. One of the beautiful things was a lady that I met who had studied virtually every single side of medicine, bar becoming a doctor. She'd worked in the radiography department and urology and you name it, she'd worked in all of these different departments. And she had been diagnosed with MS in the States. But when she had a look at what they said to her, they did a scan of her brain and they said she's got 13 lesions on the brain. She looked at this and she went, hang on a second, I'm not a typical person from the United States who would be classified or who would suffer from MS, because I don't show all the classical symptoms of a person. My characteristics are not the same of a person who should be developing MS. And through a process of utilizing meditations and detoxes and you name it, she eventually got to the stage where she said, you know what, I'm not going to accept this. She was in a hospital bed the one evening. She was virtually at death's door, and she remembers a near-death experience where she basically turned around and said, no, I'm sorry, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to allow my child to wake up tomorrow morning without a mother. And that emotional twist, that mental side of things, forced her or helped her or healed her to the extent where 2 years after deciding to take herself off the medication, she only had one lesion left on the brain. Now, she's gone ahead and she studied theta healing. And I sat next to her in some of the classes and she was going, what, really? Wow, that just resonates with everything that I've believed or everything that I've trained in. And it just doesn't tie into some of what Western medicine might think. But you know what? That's so powerful. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and there's a lot of people going out there and documenting it on the scientific side. And because it's still relatively such a new energy healing modality, it's really difficult sometimes to actually have the facts and the figures and the data there for people to understand. So as we're going along, we're documenting it, and we're getting the case studies done, and we're getting people to tell their story, either to write a testimonial or stuff like that. And it's pretty impressive the way that it's going.
Okay, so how long does a session actually last?
A normal consultation session would probably take between 30 minutes to about an hour, and that depends on how much energy the client has, how well they are. If they are terminally ill, or if they are feeling dehydrated, or if they don't have any energy, you'd probably get to the stage after about 30 minutes where you need to take a break. So a normal session would last between 30 minutes to an hour. And that's a typical consultation session. Now, a consultation needs to have an evening's bit of sleep in between the next consultation, because if you're working with a belief, if you're changing a belief, that belief needs to take effect, and it's when your body goes back into the theta state during sleep, when those belief changes are solidified within your mind, within the subconscious.
Okay, so you actually need a break between things. So you can't have a double session of this. You basically have to have one session and then, as you said, have a break for it to actually take hold.
You can have a double session if you're doing 2 half-an-hour sessions, one after the other.
Okay.
But we are told that, and we are trained in such a way that we have to rely on intuition, and we have to rely on knowing that after about an hour, because remember, when you go into the theta state, your body is releasing these endorphins, and you get this euphoric feeling as well when you release an emotional feeling, or when you work on certain belief systems and stuff. It really does trigger off certain things within the body. You might feel happy or tired or exhausted or stuff like that. So physically speaking, if you wanted to go down for about a 4-hour session, I don't think it would actually work.
Okay, yeah, okay.
But what I do say is that, you can sit down with a client, and if you find they wanting to work on a particular thing, and it gets relieved in one session, or it gets worked on within one session, it can either be instantaneous, or if they've got multiple underlying issues that you need to work on, it could take 2, 3, 4, or even 5 sessions.
Okay. Well, that was my next question. How many sessions would a person require? And I think you just answered that. It depends on how deep you need to go.
It also comes down to, as an athlete, you can turn around, you can say, tomorrow I'm going to run the 100 meters in 9.7 seconds. But if you don't follow up your thoughts with actions, then it's not going to happen. So when you come to the theta healing side of things, if you do the belief changes, you have to start believing in those belief changes as well. You have to start changing your actions. You have to start changing your thoughts. And it's very much a thing of, you've got to start practicing what you're thinking. So, it's a combination of things. You could possibly, if it's got to do with a diet or something like that, where you've got an illness and you need to change your diet, maybe you've got sugar diabetes or something like that, and you need to change your diet or something like that. There's various other things that you also need to start doing. And it starts from working on those beliefs. It starts from doing that healing session. It starts from initiating that self-healing to where you actually recover from whatever it is. And it could, some of these things are instantaneous. You can see a person release trauma that they've experienced as a child within 5 seconds once you've hit it and you've done the work with them. Or you can sit down with that person, and there could be many associated things, and it could take 2 or 3 days before that person is actually ready to release certain things, and that change starts to take place.
Okay, and how much would a session cost? I mean, on average, obviously every practitioner charges different rates.
Typically, we have guidelines in terms of the training courses and the sessions. The sessions that I do with clients, I charge around $49 per session. And the reason why I quote it in US dollars is because I don't only work in South Africa, I also work in the UK, and I'm trying to establish bases around other sides of the world as well. I would look at 3 30-minute sessions for around about 1,700 Rand approximately.
Okay.
And then obviously, it also depends on, some theta healers would sell you a single session, some would sell you a package session, 3 or 5 sessions, or whatever the case might be. So it is very much dependent on what you're going to be doing with them and how long. But there's a guideline. We do get given certain guidelines in terms of, don't charge them too much, don't charge them too little. And it's very much, it's based on, if I can try and draw it to, if I give you something for free, then it doesn't really mean something to you, because you think to yourself subconsciously, oh, well, he's giving it to me for free, so, I can come and get it tomorrow. But if I ask you to pay for a session, then you sit back subconsciously and you think, well, hang on a second, I really need to get something out of this session. It must mean something for me. So therefore, when you pay, it's that exchange principle where I'm giving a person a service, I'm facilitating healing with them. They give me money in return, and it actually means something to them. It actually starts to work for them because they then believe it's got value to it.
Okay. And I mean, is this safe to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no, and I'm a bit hesitant about it, we don't like, there's certain things that we don't like to do. We don't like to work with somebody who's pregnant. We also are very careful about working with people with really serious issues. For instance, somebody who's had a heart replacement operation. And the reason why we do this is, the Americans are very much, I'll sue you for this, I'll sue you for that, I'll sue you for this, I'll sue you for that. Now, when you do theta healing, 9 out of 10 times, you really hit an emotional spot. You work with a trauma, you work with something really deep. And that person gets to feel that trauma and that emotion, and it triggers all various feelings, and they get exhausted. And sometimes what can happen is, if that person is not physically fit, or if that person has a serious issue, we don't want that person to turn around and say to the theta healer, "You're the reason why I felt so bad the following day." And that's why we're very careful when we work with some serious issues like a heart transplant or pacemakers, or a liver transplant or a kidney transplant or something like that. The other thing that we really strongly believe in is that when a person has had something like a transplant, they bring energies and memories from the donor's body through with them into the new person, and that could be conflicting. So, there's certain types of people that we won't say no, that we won't work with them, but we will say to some people, listen, you need to get clearance from your doctor that it's safe for you to actually undergo this treatment.
And, can you, besides, so you say there's no side effects then, besides the healing that takes place?
Man, I tell you what, the side effects are pretty positive. There's... Some of the teachings that we get very, very much rely on the fact that if a specific type of belief is taken out, we need to replace it with a positive belief. And if that is not done, like for instance resentment, if you replace resentment, if you take resentment out of a person, if you do the healing with them and you don't replace it with a positive belief, then that resentment could turn into a grudge against exactly the same person that they had the resentment for.
Okay.
So, there are certain things that we are taught very carefully on, and they say to us, listen, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to do it, etc., etc. There's a very strong code of ethics that we operate to. Vianna is the only person at this point in time who's teaching instructors. And when she goes through the stuff, she really goes through the stuff. She goes through certain things and she highlights it to us, and she says, listen guys, you have to remember that when you're doing this is what you have to do. You have to be careful about that because you can't do this. And that's the nature of the game. It has to be structured. We've got to be told, listen guys, be careful. You don't want this to happen. So, and through her experiences and through the things that she's done and she's documented, and through the experiences of other theta healers, it's developed into a very, very nice structured and very good energy healing modality, so that today, when you walk out of a theta healing session, if you haven't released some type of an emotion, then there must be something that you're really covering up pretty badly. The normal look on some of my clients, when they come out of the session, they've got this huge smile and this relief, and you can see the shoulders were tensed before the session, and afterwards they're just so relaxed, and it's like, wow, man, I'm smoking drugs or something and I haven't even touched the stuff, this is great.
Again, and does one have to believe in theta healing for it to work?
No. You have to believe in a creator. You have to believe in the creator of all that is. So it's not like I would maybe say to somebody, okay, fine, my creator is God. For somebody else, their creator might be Muhammad. For somebody else, it might be Buddha. You have to believe in a divine creator, or the creator of all that is. That's the one thing. Okay. And you don't have to believe that theta healing will work, because it does. When the theta healer goes into the theta state, there's this energy transfer, and they initiate the energy healing, and the person starts to feel vibrations or subtle things that happen to them, and they start feeling lighter because all of that toxic trauma and energy that they've stored in their body, the resentment that they've had for somebody, has been released, and it's great.
I'm Elaine Housen, you're in the Zone, One Zone, Zone Radio. Getting back to our discussion on theta healing. We were talking during the break, and you mentioned you don't actually have to physically be at the theta healer's premises to have one done. How's that possible? What is the process there?
Elaine, that's pretty much correct. We do one-on-one consultations with a person in person, so we'll be sitting with a person, or we can do it via Skype. Skype is such a beautiful little tool that you can actually connect with a person, and you have the ability to do everything that you do in person over Skype. So you don't actually need to be sitting right next to somebody to actually do a consultation with them. They could be 300, 600, 7,000, 12,000 kilometers away, and you can still do the consultation with them.
Oh, that's wonderful. And can you actually use theta healing on yourself?
Now that's the magic thing. Yes, you can. What impressed me so much about theta healing when I started with it was that the techniques that they teach you are very simple, very easy, very quick to learn, and they're very effective. Now, when we talk about the muscle testing, they teach you 3 different techniques that you use. All of them are ways in which you can test for the positive or the negative belief in a particular belief. And 2 of those you can actually use on yourself, which is fantastic. So, you know, when it comes to the muscle testing, also when it comes to the digging work, you can actually use all of these techniques on yourself. So theta healing is not just for other people. You know, if you've got a desire to work on other people, theta healing is something that you can use for yourself. You can use theta healing for manifesting abundance in your life, for success, for love, for a whole range of things. And the techniques like the meditation technique, where you actually manifest the abundance, you specify what you want, you go and do the meditation, you do the visualization. And the whole important thing about witnessing this whole thing going through, you can do for yourself. So you don't have to rely on a theta healer being there to help you work on yourself, but you can do it yourself. And if you have the privilege of having a theta healer with you, then it just works 2 ways, because then you as a theta healer and somebody else as a theta healer, the 2 of you connect, and there's just so much more cohesion in terms of what you guys are doing. And the other theta healer might have an intuition that you're trying to cover something up, or whatever the case might be. So yeah, man, it's fantastic.
Now, I know we've spoken about obviously working on yourself. So if someone wants to study this, how do they go about becoming a practitioner, or just if they want to use it on themselves?
Alain, there's 2 schools or 2 directions that you can take. One, you can take the practitioner's direction, and the second is that you can become a teacher. Now, to do the practitioner courses, anybody who is registered as an instructor can teach you the practitioner courses. And we're talking about things like the basic DNA, the advanced DNA, there's rhythm, there's the game of life, there's a number of different courses. And the instructors are taught by Vianna herself, and they are taught so that there is a quality framework across theta healing, which makes sure that it's consistent. And then the instructors will then offer these courses around the globe. If somebody would like to become a practitioner, they just have to watch out for a basic DNA course or an advanced DNA course. Connect up with that instructor. There's a website where all of the instructors are listed, so you can double check and make sure that the person is actually a theta healer. And then the person will offer a course, and during the course they'll give you a basic practitioner's manual, and they'll give you the Introduction to Theta Healing book. So there's various bits and pieces of the thing, but it's important to understand that the courses are offered, and like for instance the basic and the advanced practitioner courses are 70 to 80% practicing, because a lot of these techniques require a lot of practicing or a lot of work that you do. So it's not a lot of theory and no practical stuff. There's a lot of practical stuff that gets done. And then a group of people, like 10 or 15 or 20 people, would get together with a theta healing instructor, and they'll sit down for 3 days and they'll do the basic course, and they'll learn all of the techniques that they need. And then they go on the advanced course and they do a lot of feelings and downloads and stuff which supplement the basic course. And that's just basically the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are courses that run for 4 weeks solid, you know, and we're talking about things where you go into heavy things like disease and disorder and world relations. Now, disease and disorder is one of the big courses, because you discover and you are taught about all the different body parts and all the vital signs and everything that constitutes your body, like the liver and the kidneys and stuff like that. And then you're also taught things about that, you know, what beliefs or what emotions or what traumatic experiences are linked to this particular organ. So there's a lot of teaching available out there, but at the moment I think there's only 7 registered teachers in South Africa.
Okay, and you've actually got some trainings coming up shortly.
Yes, I do. I have a basic DNA course which is going to be running on Friday, this coming Friday, at the Steenberg Wine Farm. It's a 3-day course. It'll start on Friday, run through Saturday and Sunday, and it's about 5.5 hours of training each day. Plus there's also lunch, and there's coffee and tea, and there's a bit of other stuff. And then I will also be running an advanced DNA course on the following Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. And then after that, anybody who's in London or the UK listening in on the show, I'll be in the UK doing some training courses out there.
And for the South African listeners, I mean, what is the cost of those courses that you're doing?
The courses are costed at 3,750 Rand. We get given a basic guideline and said we should be charging for our courses at around about $400. Now, because of the exchange rate keep on going up and down, up and down, up and down, I haven't been able to keep up with it. So I don't want to charge the people too much. So I've set the price at 3,750 Rand per course.
Okay, so that's the DNA and the advanced, so
yes.
3,750 each.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and because it's LifeZone's first birthday, you've actually got a bit of a surprise for us.
I have. I've decided to give you guys a bit of a birthday present.
That's wonderful. Tell us what it is.
Alain, what I've decided is that in the spirit of your birthday, the 1-year birthday, I thought, well, let me see if I can't give the first person who writes into Zone Radio a 50% scholarship on the actual course. So instead of paying 3,750 Rand, you pay half of that. And then the extra is that the next 20 people will receive a free consultation from me, and that's your birthday gift. I'd like to support you guys, and I'd like you guys to be happy, and I'd like your listeners to experience theta healing. So yeah, let's get it going.
That's wonderful, and the individual consultation is basically worth about 550 Rand. So it's also quite a nice gift.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so if you'd like to get one of those free consultations or get 50% off, the first person to send an email to studio@zoneradio.co.za and just put in the subject line Theta Healing Life Zone and tell us that you'd like that 50%, and the first person that we actually draw for that will get that one, and then the next 20 will get a free Theta Healing session with Craig. Craig, that's fantastic.
You are most welcome.
Great. So just remember that's studio@zoneradio.co.za and send us that email, and then we will announce on the next show, next Sunday, we will let people know who they are. Craig, looks like our hour is up. If people want to actually have a session or find out more information, how can they get hold of you?
Right. The easiest way for somebody to get hold of me is probably by email. I do a lot of traveling. My email address is Craig, that's CRAIG, Craig, at Theta Principle, that's THETAPRINCIPLE.com. So that's Craig at thetaprinciple.com. You can try and get me on the South African mobile number as well. Unfortunately, the reception is not that great sometimes, but that is 081 428 0603. That's 081 428 0603. Or if you'd like to go and have a look at my website, the website is www.thetaprinciple.com.
Craig, thank you very much. I'm going to put those details up on the Facebook page for our listeners. Once again, thank you for coming in this evening.
Alain, thank you very much for the opportunity. Hi to everybody in South Africa. Thanks for all my friends and all the family and everybody listening in. Hi to Natasha in Russia, in India at the moment, and hi to everybody else all around the world. Thank you very much. I'd like to get this theta healing community started in South Africa and really strong, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Craig.